This is TWiT.
We talk about big data a lot, and a lot of times when we're talking about it, we discuss the darker side of big data. But our guest today is going to talk about how it can be used against us. He has been using how it can be used for us. He's been using GIS and mapping software to create a map that tracks the opioid crisis. Jeremiah Lindeman is a public interest technology fellow at New America. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you're going to show us how to use data for us, not against us. It can be for us.
Right.
So tell us first a little bit about the personal story that you had that got you involved in tracking this crisis.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. So unfortunately, I lost my little brother to the opioid epidemic. It was nearly 10 years ago. JT was my best friend, my best man at my wedding, and a really instrumental part of my life. As you can imagine, talking about you lost someone to drugs is not something I easily talked about. I didn't talk very much about it to people at all for several years. But I started hearing more and more about it on the news and realized, he wasn't alone in this and really was part of in the beginning of this epidemic that you're hearing about on the news every day. So I started to apply my career path of technology and using GIS to help address and really become an advocate for getting awareness about this out.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about it till I read your story, but it really does seem like there is a stigma. And then looking at your map, which we'll talk about, I just like looking at everyone's story is really, really moving. So you, if you're watching the video, you can see the map right now. You said first that you tried to volunteer, but I think it's amazing how you use skills that you already had to make this map. Tell us a little bit about how it works.
Yeah, so this map is all about, it's called Celebrating Lost Loved Ones. The idea is families come in and they add a family member that's been lost to the opiate epidemic. It's really to break the stigma that is associated with this. I think so easy, you can hear someone maybe respond to the opiate epidemic of, oh, they're just druggies, they made their choice, they deserve to die. And really, for many people that are affected, it's much deeper than that. These are great people that have been lost. And there's a lot of people that are going through this crisis right now that maybe are not seeking treatment, or, there's families not talking about this because of that stigma that's associated with it. So I got started just by meeting, I live in Colorado, meeting some other families in Colorado that were impacted. It kind of started locally, and we just added some stories on a map and kind of turned it into a map that just has spread by some news reports and social media. There's a button where families can go and upload their picture and a biography. For every picture you can click on, you can read a little bio about each person too.
I'm curious to kind of understand a little bit more about GIS and how that's being implemented and used here. What is GIS exactly, and how are you tapping into that for this project?
Sure. So GIS is short for Geographic Information Systems. So you can think about any type of piece of information, and if it has a spatial component, that's what GIS is. It's software that brings that in together so you can start to map it and make decisions about it. So my career has been working for a company called Esri, and primarily helping local governments map their assets and anything that they work with. This is maybe just a slightly different spin on that, and with a different topic.
So you mentioned a little bit about the stigma of this underreporting, that we might, even though we hear a lot about how big this crisis is, how many people and families are affected, that you say that the numbers might actually be underrepresented. Are there other reasons besides just the stigma? What are some of the reasons why people aren't reporting that deaths were involved, that the death was caused by opioids?
Sure. So there's official statistics that, maybe it's the CDC reports that are the official overdose from opioids. But they've actually had a couple reports saying that's far greater than that. And there's a few reasons. One is anytime a opiate death occurs, they're looking at official toxicology reports of the number of drugs that have been in the system. Well, there's some places where if the coroner's report or the autopsy wasn't done in time, maybe the drugs might leave the system. So it's not that official, not meeting that official level of toxicology. There's another report where rural counties are running out of funding to do autopsies. So you're kind of getting this unknown of what's happening. And then there's all these other cases. There's a bigger mental illness umbrella. There's, cases where there's suicides. And in those suicides, it may have been opiate related. There may have been a highly contributing factor, or car crashes because someone was in maybe a drug altered state, from these opioids.
And in reading through this, obviously, we're talking about how this is being underreported. How is the data that you're tracking here? I mean, is that different? You're calling upon people to kind of go in there almost in a crowdsourced sort of way and populate this. How is that mechanism adding to to the benefit of this whole progress?
Yeah, so there's really two things. The first is, you described it best. The Celebrating Lost Loved Ones is just a crowdsourcing map. It's about sharing personal stories, getting attention, and really just shining the light on the epidemic more. People are much more inclined to listen to these personal stories, especially in their neighborhood. Mm-hmm. But really, the next phase is, what do we do about the regular data that is maybe reported from governments, and how can we track that better and also put that on a map to see where the problems are?
And tracking will lead to more funding and more, it's leaving my mind right now, the drug that's used to combat addiction, more of that, right?
Correct. Yeah, naloxone. Or Narcan. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's basically a drug that can be used to revive an overdose. So yeah, my whole take on this is, if we can start to understand where this is happening, we can start to address it better. We can supply first responders better, and with naloxone, they can see where they are responding to incidents. There's a big need for more treatment. So looking at where treatment facilities are versus where these deaths or maybe responses to naloxone by first responders are happening, we can start to put treatment, and hopefully that funding is going to be coming for more treatment in the right place.
Is there a need for the data to be super up to date? Like, I mean, is there, I don't know, does it lessen the impact or the power of this information for it to be outdated? And is it relatively up to date in your experience?
I believe it's very out of date, and that's something I'd like to see governments tackle more. The general process is a county coroner or medical examiner will record death data. Then it will, at the maybe year end, will go reported to the state. The state will report it to the CDC. So you're seeing these year-end reports from the CDC that really is over a year old. So for first responders or local advocacy groups on the ground, that's not relevant to make any type of decision about placing treatment or doing focused outreach awareness efforts if you can't tell when it's happening. So, yeah, I would love to see more up-to-date data being harvested by the people that are collecting it.
And you're launching a new project similar to this next month. Can you tell us about that?
Right, correct. So I've been working with New America with a fellowship, and what we're going to be starting next month is launching an opioid mapping initiative. And really it's just be bringing together local governments that are already doing this. So some of those problems that we just described of mapping where the deaths are, mapping them in real time. And I'm just getting them all together, and we're going to learn from each other more on best practices. I'll be documenting more. So if other local governments want to jump on to see how they can do things, they can learn from these kind of people that are leading the front in this. So working with about 10 to 12 local governments across the country that are already doing this.
And if people want to be involved or just learn more about it or add their story, where's the best place for them to go?
So I have a Twitter handle, RX Heroin Maps. And then on Facebook, there's a Facebook page called Celebrating Lost Loved Ones. I've been putting the information on those two places. There will be a website for the opioid mapping initiative in a couple weeks.
Well, Jeremiah, thank you so much for joining us. I love what you're doing at New America. New America is a great place. I love that they are have this fellowship. Or will you be doing something else? I know you're the Public Interest Technology Fellow. Is this the only project you'll be working on, or will there be other projects in the future?
So New America has a whole group of fellows working in public interest technology. They're all doing really fascinating things to, just really help move along to make the nation a better place. But my role for this is really to work specifically within the opioid mapping initiative.
Well, thank you so much. Jeremiah Lindeman is a software engineer, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thank you.